Hello and welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me as always is Mike. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm all right. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking.
Thank you. Welcome.
Justin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I've been sprayed by 0 skunks, unlike some of the protagonists in one of the films we'll be talking about today. So, all things considered, I'm pretty great.
Have you guys ever actually been sprayed by a skunk?
No, but I've been excited and happy every time I've driven by, like, where, one is on the highway. I don't know if it means they're dead or they sprayed recently or whatever, and you get that smell. Mm-hmm. I'm into it.
You're into it?
Yeah, I like the smell.
Like, you like the smell?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's one of those, it's like one of those guilty pleasure smells.
Right, like your own dirty feet.
Yeah.
Oh.
My feet don't really stink that bad, though.
Yeah, mine neither.
Every once in a while. Like after a long day of work.
Yeah. Do you like not wear socks?
I always wear socks.
That's good. If people out there, if you're listening and you're one of the guys who like doesn't wear socks every now and then, you think your feet don't smell, you're probably not. You probably just wear socks every day. And if this is your first time joining us, we don't usually like to start off every episode talking about socks or feet. We usually like to start off talking about what is on our minds, which is usually the media we've been watching or reading, and then we move into a feature review. This week, we are reviewing Under the Silver Lake.
Finally. Yeah. Whew. It's only been about a year and a half now. Also, don't forget that each month we also review a film from the Criterion Collection, which is voted on by you, the listeners. So go check out our latest episode on Safety Last and look forward very soon to an episode on Stalker.
And if you want to vote in the polls to help us choose our next Criterion film, or if you want to send us questions on the films that we're going to be reviewing each week, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Casual Cinecast. You can also send your questions directly to casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And, of course, if you haven't already and you like the show, go into iTunes, give us a 5-star review. It helps other people find the show, and it also makes us feel good.
Indeed. And if you know anyone who has a smartphone and a podcast app on it, just, fire it up and hit subscribe.
Yeah. It's important to note that if you download the episode, if it gets downloaded and people don't listen, that still counts as a download for us, which is pretty cool.
And we will just live in ignorance thinking we have one more fan than we do.
Yeah, ignorance is bliss. I'm happy to live there. I'm moving in.
And with that, are we ready to move into what has been on our minds this week?
Totes.
I am ready.
All right, let's do it.
You on the mark!
No idea why I said totes.
I think because I said it not too long ago before we recorded.
Well, that's probably why it's in my head then, yeah.
Yep. That's totes why.
All right. So I guess I think I have the smallest amount of things on my mind. Not because I have the smallest mind, but...
Yeah, you were walking straight into a joke and I was getting ready to...
I know, I could cut it off.
Pounce.
Cut it off before it happens. But so if you guys don't mind, I will go first today.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you already have. No point in asking now.
So some of the things I watched will be covered later, but I did have one question, and this comes from my fiance specifically. She wanted me to ask you guys about this because we watch a lot of shows together, shows that are on Netflix, on Hulu, HBO, whatever. We binge shows, right? We don't really watch a lot of shows that are on like week to week. So currently we're watching through Frasier. We're also watching Boy Meets World. We've watched The Office, etc. But I do this thing when I'm binging a show. When we hit the end of a season, when we watch the last episode of a particular season, I like to take a break for the evening or for the day and at least wait until the next day to start the next season so that I at least maintain some sort of sense of like time and space and not like fall into that binging trap where like everything runs together. I feel like you're getting a little bit more in tune with like how the TV show is meant to be viewed if you take just even like a day gap between seasons. And Nicole, my fiance, is livid every time I want to do this. Because usually, seasons end on like that, like I got to know what happens next, or can't wait to see what happens next season kind of moment. That happens a lot, and I kind of force her to wait sometimes. But what do you guys think about that? What is your opinion on that? Are you with me? Or are you with Nicole?
So, I guess it depends on the night. So, how many episodes have you watched? If you only watch one episode, will you call it a night if that's the last episode of the season?
Ideally, yes.
See, I don't think I would necessarily do that. it depends on my level of obsession with the current show that I'm in. And if I'm binging it, I usually get pretty obsessed. I think...
Yeah, you're talking to the guy who binged 3 seasons of Outlander in like a week.
Yeah, that was rough. And you also deal with burnout on that, because I didn't get quite finish it because I kind of got burned out and I wanted to go back to it fresh again. But yeah, if I get obsessed with something, I'll burn through it. So yeah, I'm I guess with Nicole on this. I appreciate your stance on it because I think that may be a little bit more appropriate way to watch it. But when I'm binging something, I just want to know what's going to happen next. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, it kind of depends. There aren't many shows where I really want to dedicate more than 2 hours a night to it. There are the occasional shows. Like if I'm really into something, like when I was watching Breaking Bad a few years back, and I think it was like only seasons 1 through 3 were on Netflix at the time because season 4 was like in the process of airing. I didn't wait. You know what I mean? I kind of just binged straight on through it. And I probably spent like at least 8 hours a day watching that show,
Yeah. I once watched 9 hours of Making a Murderer in a row.
Ooh, that sounds incredibly depressing.
Yeah.
It was fascinating / depressing. But anyways,
yeah,
go ahead.
So when you get on the show's wavelength, I'm like Chris. I especially if it's like the way it all fell out is like, oh, tonight we only have 1 episode to watch, and I was in the mood to spend all night watching this show. But you know what? We made it to like episode 9 out of 10 seasons, or out of 10 episodes, last night. So it only leaves me an hour worth of something to watch. If I'm in the mood to watch that thing, I might like watch it, take a break, have a meal, and then kind of plan it that way. So there can be like a conversation in between there. Cause I think that is something that does to get lost in the binging, right? Is like the conversation in between episodes. That is something I try to somehow maintain when I am binging something. Like my girlfriend and I will take frequent breaks in between episodes all the time just so we can talk about it or whatever. So I don't know, I don't have an answer for you. Most of the time I would say probably not, because I wouldn't want to put that arbitrary limit on myself. If I have nothing to do tonight and tomorrow night I will be only able to watch I'll be able to watch less TV. So I don't know. I would say if it doesn't feel right, don't put the limit on it. But also maybe try to just plan it to where you can have conversations in between episodes instead of like full night breaks,
Yeah. I think the break, a little bit of break is important. Like it all started for us when we first watched through Lost. And spoiler alert for Lost, but like the end of season 3, I believe it's the end of season 3 where Jax finds Kate and he's like, we got to go back to the island. Like that episode ended and she was like, we got to watch the next one right now. And I got to figure out what that's about. Right. And I was like, let's go have dinner and let's like watch it tomorrow. And like, then we can think about it and talk about it tonight. But that's how it all started.
So that was her first watch through of it. Right. And this is you'd already seen it. Right.
Yeah. But I also had that.
He had seen it.
Yeah. So, I mean, for her, I could see, especially in that situation, you're like, I got to watch the next episode, where it's a little bit easier for you because you're like, oh, I've already seen it. I know what's going to happen.
But you know what? Sometimes, though, I've gotten the feeling that like binging a show has lessened my overall enjoyment of it because it's in my brain for less time.
Right.
I think that is also a thing. I mean, I just talked about Outlander and how I just like burned through 3 seasons of it very quickly.
Yeah.
And as I got towards the end, I was burning out on it a little bit, and I knew that I wanted to go back to it. If I kept going, I would start disliking it more and more. So I took a step away so that I could come back to it, a little bit more fresh. And I will go back to it, and I like that show. But there is a thing about like watching too much of something all at once and disliking it because of it.
Well, I don't even mean that. I'm saying like, let's use Game of Thrones here as an example. I kind of mentioned this on a previous podcast where like, I would say like seasons 1 through 4 benefit from like pause and the week to week thought. You know what I mean? Because the show is good enough and nuanced enough to stand up to the week to week thinking about it, right? That's part of the enjoyment.
Right.
Once it hits season 5 through this current season that's going on now, the show really works better to binge it, probably. Because they ran out of source material. So they have broad strokes, like the stuff that they need to do, but without like all that nuanced source material, it's just kind of it's better to binge it.
There's not as much to sink your teeth into week to
Yeah,
week.
exactly. There's not enough to keep it like to hold it up week to week, right? The less you think about the nuance of it all, the more you're going to enjoy it. So it just depends on the show, man. With something like Lost, I would say go ahead and binge it because I don't think the waiting week to week is going to pay off emotionally for her, but maybe it will.
Sure.
You know, ultimately, I think where Lost faltered was it built up on that whole week to week thinking about it, speculate about it, and then you find out in the last season that it was never really interested in that to begin with. You know, it was more interested in character all along. So as long as the conversations are about that, you know,
Yeah.
That was a real twist of Lost.
right? Yeah, exactly. Which is that like your theories don't matter if just be on board with the characters themselves.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I wouldn't force that break between each episode. I'm just kind of more of like a let's end this season and reflect on this season as a whole before we just immediately dive into the next season and
Yeah,
like
that
move
makes
on.
sense.
You know what I mean? Like that's the only time that I get into that idea.
Like on Netflix, like I don't really like that release strategy for every single thing. Like that show Mindhunter.
Mm-hmm.
That show really should be released week to week because I think that show is good enough to handle it.
Right.
Yeah.
But they don't, and then like it's like me watching a movie. You know, it's like it's out of my brain like a week later.
And on that same note with Netflix, Stranger Things benefits from it. You know, it's better watched, I think. If you had a week to week with Stranger Things, it wouldn't be as good.
Right.
So.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like on the question of taking breaks, specifically taking breaks between seasons, we're basically at a draw. I'm on my side, Chris is on Nicole's side, and Mike, you're kind of in the middle. So we've arrived at nothing. No answer.
Yeah.
Well done, everybody.
Yeah. You're welcome, Nicole.
All right. Well, that is all I have that is on my brain today. So who wants to go next? How about Chris?
And actually, if you guys should write us in and let us know how you guys binge movies or TV shows
movies.
and binge movies. Yes, well, now you can with the MCU. But you let us know what you think, and then we can break this tie.
Absolutely.
There you go.
But what's been on my mind is this week I went and watched Long Shot, the new movie with Charlize Theron and Seth Rogen.
What was the former title for that movie?
Flarsky.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. I think this is actually one of my most anticipated movies, too.
It was.
Yeah, I think it has great performances by Charlize Theron and Seth Rogen. I think they're both really charming and likable. I think there's something with, I think all of Seth Rogen's movies is, at some point you think, how is Seth Rogen with this girl? Because all the girls that he always gets with are so much better looking than him. But I think with his charisma and his charm in there, you understand it, and it actually works. I think ultimately, if you've seen a romantic comedy before, you guys could probably tell me what's going to happen right now before you even go into the theater and see it.
Mm-hmm.
There are some twists on it. You know, it's a little bit more maybe political driven because she is in politics. She's the Secretary of State about to run for president. Other than that, it's pretty standard romantic comedy fare that is elevated by Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron. And man, Charlize Theron's really good in this. It's amazing how she can disappear into just about any role. Like halfway through, I was like, this is the same girl that played Mad Max, you know, and she's so completely different.
She played Furiosa. Tom Hardy played Mad Max.
It's true. But I recommend it. You know, as a typical rom-com, I would probably wait for it to be streaming, or a date night would be great. And mainly for the performances. I think the performances are really great. So
that's my Friday night plans this week. I think it's potentially going to see Long Shot for date night.
Yeah, I think this is a movie you're gonna like, Justin. So
I like romantic comedies, man.
Yeah, and you can report back next week and tell us what you think.
Let me ask you this:
Yes,
was there a lot of slapstick humor? The trailer I saw seemed like it would be.
There's that one moment that you see in the trailer where he falls down the stairs. There's really not a lot of that slapsticky humor. There are some gags that are fairly adult that happen more towards the end of the film that maybe don't quite feel like they fit in with the movie. because it's more along the lines of Seth Rogen's like gross out or adult comedies as opposed to this romantic comedy that we've got. A lot of the jokes come from making fun of Fox News, and then there's also a Steve Bannon type character in here that's pretty enjoyable, I think. And he's under a bunch of makeup. I don't even know. I should look up who that actor was because he's under a bunch of makeup, and he's just got like pores in his face, and he kind of looks like Steve Bannon, but he's like a Rupert Murdoch, and a lot of the humor comes from that stuff and just the unique situations that you would find yourself while you're courting the Secretary of State who's about to run for president.
Do you remember that character's name? Is it Andy Serkis?
Is Andy Serkis in this film?
Yeah, apparently.
Parker Wembley, yes, actually. Maybe it's a CG character. Probably should have looked that up first, but yeah, great job by Andy Serkis. Yeah, thanks, Justin.
I'm curious about this movie, where it's going to fall in this director's work, because I just looked him up. Jonathan Levine. He's directed a couple films that I really like. Which one would be The Whackness, from like 2008.
Whackness. Yeah. Ben Kingsley, right?
Ben Kingsley and Josh Peck.
Yeah.
He also directed 50-50, which was a film I really liked, also starring Seth Rogen and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. But then he went on to do, he did The Night Before, which I was not a very big fan of.
Didn't see it.
And then Snatched, which I didn't see because I didn't think it looked very good with Amy Schumer.
Yeah, that was last year.
Oh, yeah.
And Goldie Hawn.
I never saw that either.
I haven't seen very much of his films. I did see 50-50, which I really liked. I also saw Warm Bodies, the one about the zombies that fall in love. And
that was him?
Yeah. Which I thought was cute, but it wasn't that great.
Nope.
This would be below 50-50, but better than average.
Okay.
I think there's maybe some missed opportunities in there that could have made it stand out more from the rom-com without spoiling anything. Just they could have differentiated themselves a bit more so than just being kind of a standard rom-com.
Makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's what's been on my mind. Mike, what is on your mind?
Well, a couple things. First, I wanted to talk about the Hateful Eight extended version.
Nice.
First, I just kind of wanted to talk just a bit because maybe the casual person might not even know this exists.
Yeah.
So recently, Netflix released a new version of The Hateful Eight, which is the 8th film from Quentin Tarantino. There have previously been 2 versions of this movie. The theatrical version, which is the one on Blu-ray that most people have seen, and then the Roadshow version, which had a very limited theatrical run in, I believe, 70 millimeter. Justin, I believe you and I saw that in theaters together.
We did.
So anyways, now Netflix has released a new version of the movie altogether, and it's actually longer than the Roadshow version. And I guess the most interesting thing about the extended version is it's no longer even really a movie. It's been edited into 4 50-something minute episodes.
Yes.
Yeah, which might sound stupid and terrible and weird, but Tarantino himself actually oversaw the edit. So it's like an officially released cut and not just some dude who works at Netflix putting his dirty, grubby hands all over other people's movies. So I think that kind of accurately describes what this is.
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't feel super forced. I watched this today, actually. I had the day off, so I binge-watched it.
Yeah. I only saw the Roadshow version that once in theaters, and then I saw the official theatrical version on Blu-ray shortly after it was released, but I haven't seen it since then. So I don't have the best memory, but I seem to remember scenes in this version now that were not even in the Roadshow version. So I think that's actually kind of interesting. So this is like the longest cut of the Hateful Eight that you could probably ever going to get.
And the episodes are, 50 something minutes, but I will say that they also include a, I don't know how long, I guess, minute long, catch up of what's happened in the episodes before. It's sort of a recap, and then also includes an opening credits thing for each one. So, and then I think there's some end credits too on each one. I'm not sure if they're as long as the end credits on the last one, but there's probably about 5 to 6 minutes of not not actual show in each episode too, which I think brings it down to like just a little over 3 hours total.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as intimidating as it sounds.
Yeah, it's about as long as Endgame. So there you go.
I actually kind of liked the episode breaks and like the seeing the opening titles every time, because you get to hang out with that really awesome song from Ennio Morricone.
Yeah, you get to hear it every time.
Yeah, it's really cool and epic sounding.
Yeah, although Netflix, if you just keep watching, it skips that each time.
Oh, see, I watch it from my phone and cast it onto my TV using Chromecast. So it doesn't really work that way using my app.
I did it through the PS4 app, and every time it went to like the chapter or the episode title that starts each episode, and it skipped over that opening credits and the recap automatically.
So, personally speaking, I would say that if I have to pick, I would say this is the best version of the movie. I mean, if you really wanted to watch the movie and get immersed into the story, this is the best way to do it. The episodes all end in cool places, which were pretty much just the chapter breaks before in the movie. That said, if you are not a fan of the Hateful Eight, this version will not make you like it. But I think, to be honest, I think the episodic format was pretty nice for such a long movie, especially one with so much talking. I would not be opposed to more movies getting like extra filler scenes and different versions edited into like series or whatever. As long as the filmmaker is wanting to do it, you know, Netflix could put out all kinds of interesting alternate editions of things. What do you guys think about that idea?
I think it could work for some movies. I'm a little unsure if it worked for this movie, and maybe it's because I had that experience of where I didn't really take any breaks, and Netflix automatically skipped the recap, so it kind of just ended, and then
it just felt like a weirdly edited movie.
Yeah, and then it came up and would say written and directed by Quentin Tarantino, and then it would go to the next episode and start at the chapter title, essentially. So like, it didn't quite feel that different from a movie.
I broke it up over 2 days, so it definitely, I felt the episode breaks pretty.
Yeah, I think it would have been like, if I would have needed to take a break, it would have been awesome to have this place to stop and then come back and get a recap.
Yeah. Kind of ties in with our binging conversation we had earlier, which is, is it better to binge it or is it better to like think about it?
Yeah, I could see like if you took a break in every spot where each episode ends, you would have something to think about and talk about and be like, what is actually going on here? And let's think about what are these characters actually thinking and doing, and who's who and what's what, right?
Yeah, and each episode would unfold. Like, I guess that's the best way to, like, every episode you get more information, I guess.
Yeah. I will say this is my second time to watch The Hateful Eight, so I never saw the regular theatrical version. I've only seen the 70mm Roadshow version, and then this one, which I just looked it up, and that Roadshow runtime was 3 hours and 2 minutes. So I'm not totally sure what extra stuff is how much extra stuff is in here, and I don't remember specifically what it is. So I'm not sure. I can't comment if this is the best version of it or not. It's a little hard for me to say because I'm not super big on this movie. I liked it okay the first time, but I think watching it again, I felt kind of like there were a lot more things that bothered me, the things that I didn't like, which is a totally different conversation than this. But you know what? It kind of like colored my thoughts on this extended version because I liked it less this time than I did the other time. But I don't know that that's a reflection on like the format.
Sure. I think for me, this is middle of the road Tarantino. Like, it's not his lowest, but I think it's better than Django Unchained and Death Proof. But that's okay because I like those movies too. I think this movie's more fun to think about and talk about rather than like Django or Death Proof, I think. But yeah, this new version did not make me feel any differently about the movie one way or the other, right? Like, it didn't send me over the Hateful Eight still firmly holds a spot in like middle of the road Tarantino, like slightly near the bottom. But again, that's not that low considering that's just low tier Tarantino.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where I'll agree with. Like, it's in exactly the same spot as I've always had it ranked in my Tarantino, which is not too far from yours. But I put Death Proof higher than it, but still, it is better than Django for me. So it stayed in the exact same spot. So you're right. So I don't know that this is a wholly different experience.
Yeah, I will say that I am more interested in the director's cut of Django that he mentioned when he talked about this, where he talked about he's going to have like a 300-something minute version of Django.
Oof.
Yeah, which I know you're going to skip, but I'm actually really interested in that because I remember reading the screenplay for Django Unchained before it came out, and there is a huge section that is just not even in that movie at all, involving Kerry Washington's character, that I think was filmed, like a whole subplot.
Right. I would be interested in that as an experiment for me to see if it makes some of the main characters more relatable, which is my big issue with Django. So like if I had more time with them, maybe there's more character development that makes everything more satisfying, you know? Maybe I'm more long, like after spending more time with the characters, I'll get that character development, that character attachment through a longer version. So it's a maybe, you know, that I might watch it for that reason.
It's interesting, regardless of whether or not it'll be good.
Yeah.
So that's kind of all my thoughts on the extended version of the Hateful Eight.
Mine too.
All right, cool. So the other thing that I watched was Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile, which is the film about Ted Bundy, starring Zac Efron and directed by Joe Berlinger. This is mostly about Ted Bundy's relationship with his longtime girlfriend, and in the second half of the movie, his trial. So, Justin, I believe you watched this as well, right?
Also watched it today. It was a busy movie watching day off for me to catch up on some of these things. So,
I'll start off with my thoughts, but I think Zac Efron is really good here.
Yeah, very much agree.
He is very watchable, completely charming, but like in a slithery, gross way, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that the movie itself is as compelling as Zac Efron's performance, but it's also an easy movie to sit through, so I wouldn't call it bad. But I think some of the most interesting things that I wanted to see, the movie just kind of glosses over real quick.
Right. I got the sense that the movie expects you to know a lot about Ted Bundy going in.
Yeah.
And a lot about
I agree with that.
What he's done and all of the circumstances around, because it does skip over a lot of the details of what he did and focuses on how he's reacting to everything and reacting to being arrested and accusations, and how the people in his life, specifically the woman that he's engaged to when he first is getting arrested and getting charged with everything, like how it affects her. It's much more concerned with relationships and the effects of everything that he's doing on other people, as well as how he's handling it, like, than it is the details of the crime and showing you the crimes. Like, there's not very much like brutal serial killer murder stuff in here.
No, not at all. Some of the most compelling parts of the movie for me were watching him try to hold it all together in the face of like overwhelming, damning evidence against him, right?
Right.
And how he still like is delusional enough to like think he can talk his way out of it. I don't know. It's really interesting to watch, but also kind of cringy.
Definitely.
And uncomfortable a lot, because you're like, why are they allowing this nonsense? And then like some equally disturbing stuff of like seeing people laugh at his jokes, you know, and find him charming. And that, I think, makes me think a lot of like famous people today that we somehow stand behind under like the worst circumstances, you know? And for some reason, it's like if someone's likable and you don't see them doing unlikable things, then you'll like forgive them for anything. It seems like sometimes, you know? And I think the movie explores that. It
does. It explores media and celebrity and the way that people can look at a person and the way that media can have an influence on proceedings and the way that we think about somebody, right? Like,
yeah,
there's certainly
it gives them a pedestal.
Exactly. Yeah, there's certainly things that the media could do to screw over Ted Bundy as much as they could to put him on a pedestal, like you said, and like make him a little bit more famous and like milk his celebrity, which, like you said, you know, people kind of laugh at his jokes. They find him charming. There are segments, which I think they are recreating segments from real interviews with like people who are just watching the trial, like the average, you know, Joe American woman of the time, that are like saying, oh, I think he's cute. I can't imagine he'd do these kind of things. You know, I really like him. I think I love him, which is, it's all very interesting to watch, like watch that unfold. And I think that's a lot of what the film is commenting on.
Yeah, totally.
I did really enjoy it, though. Like, as you said, it's really watchable.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it's a great movie, but I had no trouble getting through it, and I was not bored. I found it like a very fascinating take on this, particularly with Lily Collins, who plays the woman that he's engaged to, Liz Kendall.
She's great.
She is so good, and I enjoyed watching
her eyebrows.
Yeah, her eyebrows.
You enjoyed watching her eyebrows? Because I did.
Yeah, for sure. And well, really just watching the effect that he has, because it's one thing for him to be lying and telling everyone he's innocent and insisting on that, and that has a certain effect, but it doesn't affect him nearly as much as it affects her. And watching that unfold and what she's going through was really where I was connecting to the movie a lot.
Yeah, I was actually about to say, I feel like maybe the key relationship in the movie between him and Lily Collins could have gotten more time to shine before he goes off to jail. Because I feel like the whole time I wanted more of that angle, and we got plenty of that, but that I think her relationship with him is the most interesting part of the movie, and I feel like that's over before I knew it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted more of like the time where they were together.
Yeah, before he's arrested time. Because the movie does, I don't think it's any spoiler to say that the movie pretty well starts just before he's arrested for the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
And
like it
skips
happens,
over all of his actual, like him committing the crimes and all that stuff.
and a lot of their courting.
Yeah, definitely. I think you see the day they met, right? And
more of that, I think, would have pleased me. But all in all, it is a very effective movie. I just don't think it's great.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah. Anyways, any other thoughts about extremely, shockingly wicked, vile, evil?
Well, a lot of the response I saw when the trailer first came out was people thought, wow, Zac Efron's super handsome and charming in this trailer, and is this glorifying Ted Bundy? So having seen the movie now, what do you think? Do you think that that's an issue?
No, I think that's what the movie's about. I think that was obvious from the trailer as well. I just think people are very reactionary, and sometimes they don't put together that, like, oh, this reaction is the reaction they wanted me to have.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I don't think the point.
Yeah, I think that's always been the point. I think it's a good thing. So yes, I think he is incredibly charming, and that is very much what they're trying to say.
Yeah. Any potential Oscar thing for this, Okay.
No, heavens no.
I wonder if it got released into theaters.
I saw that somewhere, like an article said it had a small theatrical run. I'm sure it's just enough to put it in contention.
Right.
Maybe if you released it a couple months down the road, you would get maybe a Best Actor nomination for Efron, but like one of those ones where everyone knows he's not going to win.
Yeah.
It's too early in the year now, and I don't think it's going to get anything.
For sure. I think a bit of an undersung performance. I really like Haley Joel Osment in it.
Oh yeah, it's nice to see him in like a part where he gets to talk and do things. I've seen him in a couple roles, I feel like, but they've always been like on the line of like cameos.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So. Yeah, I liked his character a lot. I found him very interesting for like the small amount of screen time that he had.
I don't know. I didn't really get a sense of his character, but I think, I don't know.
Maybe
he seems like a good dude.
Yeah. I guess that's it. Like I just like him.
He has a nice face.
Like him as opposed to find his character super interesting.
Yeah.
And what he adds.
I like that he's there.
Yeah.
That's enough.
Yeah, exactly. Chris, any thoughts on the movie? You interested in watching it?
Yeah, I'm probably going to check both of those out. But yeah, I think, you guys sold me on it. And as more of a film about like celebrity and how we deal with that, and yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome.
All right. So with that, are we ready to move into our review of Under the Silver Lake?
Yeah, I just want to take a moment here for a second. Since it's been so long, I just want to let everybody know I put this on my list twice last year, and we've been waiting for this movie to come out. And I just kind of want to savor this moment.
That's his most anticipated list, by the way.
Yeah, what did I say?
You said you put it on your list twice.
Oh, yeah, my most anticipated list last year, and just savor the moment because we're about to review Under the Silver Lake. It's been a long and arduous journey, but here we are.
I saw you spying on me earlier.
No, it wasn't.
See you tomorrow.
Good.
Who moves out in the middle of the night?
Nothing strange about it. She wanted to leave. How does that not make sense?
I don't understand why she didn't tell me.
Maybe she didn't like you. Maybe she knows you're poor and haven't paid your rent.
I found some kind of code or like secret message in her apartment.
It means stay quiet. Our world is filled with codes, subliminal messages, from Silver Lake to the Hollywood Hills.
Could any of this be connected to Sarah?
I know this girl.
There's a message in the music.
All right, so before we get going on Under the Silver Lake, as always, just wanted to let you know that we will be speaking generally and non-spoilers first. We'll give our general thoughts without giving away any important details of the film. And then before we get into spoilers, we'll give you a warning and then a spoiler alert. There'll be a bumper that plays, so you'll have plenty of time to pause the podcast, go watch Under the Silver Lake, come back and finish listening. Or if at that point you don't care about watching the movie, finish listening.
Okay, so Under the Silver Lake was directed by David Robert Mitchell. It stars Andrew Garfield, Riley Keough? I don't know, Elvis's granddaughter. And then Topher Grace. Yeah. The IMDb synopsis says, Sam, intelligent but without purpose, finds a mysterious woman swimming in his apartment's pool one night. The next morning, she disappears. Sam sets off across LA to find her, and along the way, he uncovers a conspiracy far more bizarre.
Far too long. 1, 2, 3 sentences. Not a good synopsis. 2 or less, I'd say. 1 ideally.
Yep. Exactly.
Disappointing.
So, this is a movie that is going to be odd to talk about.
Yeah.
And since Chris had it on his most anticipated list twice, 2 years in a row, I say it only makes sense to start with him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool. Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome, Chris.
Yeah, so there's 2 questions, I think. Was the movie worth the wait after all it getting pushed around so much? And then I think the other question would be, and we can address this later, but is why it got pushed around so much and whether we think it deserved to get pushed around. Because I don't think, when a movie gets pushed around like that so much, I oftentimes feel like it's going to be a really bad movie. And I don't think that this movie is. It actually kind of reminded me a lot of Dragged Across Concrete, because it's just kind of this big, unwieldy thing that's got a lot of stuff packed in there. But I did find it interesting and intriguing, and there's a lot of stuff in there that's kind of cool. I think Andrew Garfield is really good as this, 30-something slacker, like the synopsis said, smart, intelligent guy with no aim. I also think that Andrew Garfield probably has, if not the best, one of the best runs in cinematic history.
Oh my gosh.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
If any of you guys watch Bob's Burgers, it reminded me of like Tina from Bob's Burgers running.
It's also similar to Todd in BoJack Horseman, his run.
Yes, yeah.
If he had ran like that as Spider-Man, we wouldn't have had to go get Tom Holland. I'll say that much.
He'd still be Spider-Man.
Yep.
But yeah, so I think Andrew Garfield does a really great job. David Robert Mitchell, I think that this film is really ambitious, and I think he's trying out a lot of things in this film. It's possible that maybe it's too many things. He's trying to do too much at once here, and I'm sure we can talk about a lot of the film references that he throws in here. I think there's a lot of Hitchcock, a lot of like Mulholland Drive, Big Lebowski even. And even the soundtrack at times reminds me of Vertigo, but like a Bernard Herrmann score. I think so. It's just a lot of stuff going on here. I can't fault him for his ambition and for trying to hit one out of the park. I think we'll decide later if he actually does hit it out of the park or not. But I can't fault him for that ambition. Mike Giolakis returns from It Follows, and they collaborate here in this film. And I think that this film looks as good as, if not better than It Follows. There's a lot of recalling, a lot of like older film noir styles, and these long tracking shots that were also in It Follows that look really good. I mean, ultimately, this is a bizarre noir film that I very much could see gaining cult status and becoming a much bigger film in 5 years or 10 years. We'll get these people writing like how Under the Silver Lake got shafted when it got released, or why it wasn't understood when it got released. I can very well see that happening. But yeah, it's not nearly as bad as all the shuffling around would have you believe. So right. Yeah, ultimately I come down liking this film. So what do you guys think? Justin?
Yeah, I'll go next. I guess my anticipation of this film grew from how much you kept talking about it on here, you know?
Yeah.
I couldn't ignore it by the time that it came out. So I was definitely looking forward to watching it. Of course, a big fan of It Follows, which was the director's previous film. I haven't seen anything else he's done. I think he's done 1 or 2 other films. But basically what I'd heard about this film from a friend who went to Cannes last year, he said he saw it and it was his favorite thing that he saw at Cannes. But
Whoa.
He basically came away thinking like, that is such a bizarre movie. I'm curious to see how they market it. And I think that's part of where the movie ran into problems. And so that got me very excited about seeing that because it's a guy I trust a lot. He said it was his favorite thing amongst a lot of good things that were at Cannes. And I think it's a bizarre movie. I totally get how it's like, who is this movie for? Like, how do you market this to a mass audience? Because it's so bizarre and weird. To me, it feels, as you mentioned, Chris, a lot like Mulholland Drive. It kind of feels like a fresh, modern take on Mulholland Drive. And maybe that's part of like the LA sort of, not quite Hollywood setting, but sort of Hollywood setting. But it's, you know, Mulholland Drive was kind of this take on film noir as well. And this is kind of a take on Mulholland Drive. So it is also doing a take on film noir. But it's so bizarre. I think one viewing is not enough. And I don't think it'll be enough for anybody. Unless you just straight up don't like it. I think the best that I can feel after this single viewing is that I really, really enjoyed the ride for this film. I enjoyed every minute of it. I was never bored. I was never not into what was happening. I just think there's so much going on. And as you said, Chris, there's so many things that are attempted. There's so much film reference in it. There's so many ideas and so many details that like, I just can't comprehend it all. And I'm not sure if some of it is just an idea that doesn't add up to anything, or if I just missed it and I need to watch it again. I'll also compliment the cinematography as you did. I think this movie looks amazing. Every frame is awesome. I was just endlessly impressed by like the lighting. They do some like really stylized lighting at one point, like when you meet the girl for the first time who's swimming in the pool. There's this like shot where her eyes are like have this like really clear like bright light across them. It's almost like maybe like a light Zorro mask across her eyes. That looks like really cool. But yeah, ultimately I think it's this big puzzle. It's this big movie that just builds up the mystery of what's going on, follow the clues, unlock the puzzle a little bit more, keep adding questions. And if you like that kind of thing, and you can also deal with not having everything answered in a very easily, like perfectly wrapped up package, if you're down to continue thinking about a lot of that stuff and not get all the answers from the movie, I think this movie is great for you. Like if you like Mulholland Drive, I think this movie is awesome for you. Even if you don't, because my fiance loves Under the Silver Lake after we watch it, and she hates Mulholland Drive. So yeah, but ultimately I come down, I'm very, very positive on it. I think some of that depends on a second viewing, but right now I'm very, very high on this. It has to be one of my favorite things I've watched this year, even though I think it's going to count as a 2018 release potentially. Where do you guys come down? Is it 2018 or 19 release?
It's this year. That's when it was available to the masses. That's how I feel about it.
Okay. I could see, I know I'm going to watch this again before the end of the year, and I could definitely see it after that viewing. I feel like it could potentially end up like on my best of the year list at the end. I really liked it a lot. So Mike,
nice.
What do you think?
This is a movie like you that I wished I could have watched again before having to talk about it, but I didn't want to pay twice for it. So I don't feel adequately prepared to really break it down after only one viewing. But I will say that I did enjoy the movie. It is 2 hours and 20 minutes long, but it moves, you know. It's not slow. However, that said, I don't know that I enjoyed the movie as much as I wanted to. It's very well directed and shot. Like you said, it's beautiful to look at, just like It Follows was, but maybe better. I think that Andrew Garfield is giving a really interesting performance as this weird, disillusioned guy who is smart, but basically wasting away. You're right, this movie does feel like it's trying very hard to be Mulholland Drive, which is an amazing movie, in my opinion. But I think Under the Silver Lake is really more like Mulholland Drive meets Southland Tales.
Which is another movie I love.
Well, there you go. But somehow I think it might bite off more than it can chew.
Mm-hmm. I have the same concerns about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But overall, I did like it. I just don't know that I am as confident that it didn't misstep as you seem to be. But I don't know. I don't know. Maybe this conversation can help me figure it out. But that's kind of where I'm at right now.
And that's an interesting thing. Like, if it is a misstep, it's a very interesting misstep, right?
Yeah, exactly. It seems like a movie that is not concerned whether or not you like it.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think I get a lot of David Lynch vibes from it. Maybe some P.T. Anderson vibes in there. In the sense that, the director had a vision in mind. He wanted to say a very specific thing. But you know what? The movie is wholly unique, but that may not work for everyone. I think a lot of P.T. Anderson's last couple movies, right? Like The Master and Inherent Vice and Phantom Thread. It seems like his movies are getting more and more like, hey, if you don't like this, I don't care. And I get that vibe a lot from this movie. And I don't know where I'll end up coming down on it yet, but it has not left my mind since I saw it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Definitely.
So I kind of wanted to start off with wild speculation, and that is why it got dumped like it did from A24. I think a movie like High Life, which we just recently watched, is just as enigmatic and hard to release to audiences as this film. And I'm wondering why a movie like High Life, which I also enjoyed, but can get a theatrical release where this one doesn't. Maybe it's because it has Claire Denis behind it, and she's a much more popular filmmaker, or she's been around for longer.
Well, and that movie is probably a little bit more marketable than this one is. Yeah. This movie's almost 2.5 hours for a slow burn, and I don't know. I think, how long is High Life?
Yeah, I mean, and we don't necessarily have to compare it specifically to High Life. That's just the first thing that comes to mind. Because A24 releases a lot of odd films, and I think that this fits right into that repertoire, and I'm curious as to why you guys think it didn't get a theatrical release and kind of just got dumped.
Well, I mean, I think the only A24 movies that ever make any money are the horror movies, right?
Yeah, probably. I mean, but even, I guess, the Oscar-y films get pretty decent theatrical runs and promotion, like things like mid-90s right. and some other
And this movie
stuff.
is neither of those things.
Yeah, it's not a horror film, and it's not going to win any Oscars. Even though maybe cinematography should get a shout, depending on what else comes out this year.
Right, yeah.
But it won't get that, I'm sure.
So I think it's like the dragged across concrete mentality, right? Which is like, what do we do with this thing?
Yeah, that's true.
Right. I mean, even David Lynch, what's the last theatrical movie he had? I mean, maybe Inland Empire in 2 cities. I think it's just this kind of movie, like this weird, intentionally artsy movie, they don't make money.
And Andrew Garfield's looking a bit like a slacker, so he's looking kind of like run down, which that kind of marketability works for Matthew McConaughey and some other people, but he's not quite looking like the heartthrob that he has in like other things, I guess, or you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It looks very different constantly. So you can't even pull like the shot where he's like cleaned up. I don't know.
Interesting.
I get why it ends up where it is. I'll say that much. And I think once anyone who watches it, once you watch the movie, you'll get it too.
Well, but marketability aside, this movie is not loved by the critical community or the audience, really, So why do you guys think that is?
On my Letterboxd, it's very split from all the people that have seen it. it's either 4 stars or like 2 stars. There's not really like an in-between very much. So that's very interesting too. I think it's either something that's going to work for you. Although, Mike, you seem pretty in middle of the road on it. I don't want to put words in your mouth or anything, but...
Yeah. Did you deduce that from my 3-star rating on Letterboxd?
Is that what you had?
Yeah. I think I'm sitting at 3 stars, maybe 3.5. But that's my initial impression of it.
My thoughts on why people feel that way actually tie into the theme of the movie. And so I don't really want to say exactly why I think before we get into spoilers.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think that the theme will maybe give some stuff away if I talked about it now.
Yeah,
and that'll be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, most of what I have to say needs to be in spoilers anyway.
All right, we did get a listener question, which we've maybe touched on a little bit, but it comes from Twitter from Lewis Anderson, who is at Lewis is tweeting, and he says, I rather enjoyed Under the Silver Lake. It's quirky, unique, weird, and most definitely not for everyone. But you could say the same about It Follows. So it's kind of the director's approach and what's expected of him. And then he asks, were you a fan of the director before this film and a fan of his earlier work, It Follows? And I think I've already answered that. Definitely a big fan of It Follows. It's the only thing I've seen of his, so you could say that I am a fan of the director, but that doesn't have like a lot of experience with him to say that.
Right.
Yeah, same here. Yeah. I haven't seen anything else by him, but I did really enjoy It Follows, so I was always going to be interested in this movie, you know?
Totally.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. Loved It Follows. And I will say for the future, like I'm definitely interested in whatever this director does next because he's interesting and unique. So I think whatever he does next should be very interesting.
Right. And so, Mike, just before we get into spoilers, Mike, you said 3.5 stars, maybe 3.5 stars is what you give the film. Chris, what do you give the film?
I think I put 4 stars on there. And, you know, just like Mike, I think that's a thing that can go up or go down by half a star or so. I mean, I just really appreciate the ambition, and I think enough of it works that it's worth it. And I don't know that it's going to be on my top 10 of the year, but it's probably in contention. Like, it'll be in the top 20 maybe. I don't know.
Right.
So what about you, Justin?
I'm sitting at 4.5. I think it could go up or down a half star. I guess it couldn't go up a whole star. That would put me off the charts.
That's more stars than there are.
Exactly. But depending on a second viewing, but I will say there's something to be said for a film that makes me want to immediately watch it again. I almost turned around and rewatched it after I watched it the first time, and I almost watched it today again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say that it's very moody. It's really good at putting you in a mood.
Yeah, and holding that mood.
Yeah. Exactly.
There's a lot of different humor and things peppered throughout, but I think like ultimately the tone of the film is pretty consistent.
Yeah, you feel like you've gone through a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's maybe one of the best things we've said about it. Maybe we can just call it a day on that one.
All right. Yeah. Cool. We're done.
Oh, yeah. We should probably do spoilers, huh?
Yeah, I have a couple things I want to say in spoilers.
All right. Well, let's go.
Let's do it.
No, I guess Rosebud is just a piece in a jigsaw puzzle.
You want a cigarette you got up there? I'll tell you all about it.
Things are going to start happening to me now.
And here we go.
All right. Go ahead, Mike. You want to start us out with spoilers?
Yeah. Do you guys think he was the dog killer?
I don't know. That's one of my points is I'm not sure what the dog killer stuff really added up to in the end.
Yeah.
It felt kind of tangential and just maybe part of like the world building, but not important to the ultimate plot and mystery as it seemed like it might be.
Yeah. What do you think, Chris?
A lot of how I feel about this film is like the first time when I watched Mulholland Drive, right? You walk out of the theater and you're like, I'm not sure what all this adds up to. And it's like Justin was saying, it's about how the movie makes you feel, you know? I don't know exactly how the dog killer fits in. And I think that's something that comes from a second viewing. I don't know.
Do you think he was the dog killer, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I don't know that it matters, but I think he was. As far as what the dog killer plot line even means, I kind of have like a similar thought as like the owl killer lady.
Right. That's another note I have.
who wears the owl mask and like tries to kill people. It could be that while all this important stuff immediately affecting his community is going on, he's completely apathetic to it. Like, he's getting kicked out of his apartment. He doesn't care. He's about to be homeless. He doesn't care. There's dogs being murdered. He doesn't care. If he's not the killer himself, you know?
Right. So you're on a similar train of thought that I was thinking about it too, is that he goes down this rabbit hole mystery, you know, instead of worrying about like all of this stuff that's going on, and like especially like dog killer being the most extreme example around him.
Exactly. Like, and he seems to judge others for his own behaviors, like them being like him. Like, there's that scene where he's walking with the daughter of the news anchor guy who was killed, or the mayor guy, I can't remember, the famous guy who was killed.
Yeah, I think he's a film producer or something.
Yeah, and he's like, I hate homeless people. They're like ghosts or whatever, like poltergeists. And they just kind of hang out and watch people, and they're useless. And it's like, bro, that's you. You know, you're about to be homeless in like a day, and you don't do anything, and you're a bum, and all you do is just like creep on girls, and I don't know, you know?
Yeah, I think on a first viewing, that's what I pull away from the dog killer stuff is sort of his self-centeredness on like finding out what he's most curious about, which is like this girl that he liked, that he met and spent like an hour with, or a couple hours maybe.
It also could be, to harp on the dog killer thing a little bit more, when he first starts binocularing the main girl that he is obsessed with, she has her dog with her. So was he creeping on her, or was he creeping on that dog?
Right. I think it's a bit ambiguous.
Yeah. And he had the treats in his pocket.
Yeah. It does factor into the plot in the sense that his fascination with the dog killer zine that's out leads him to the guy who writes it, who has the map on the box of cereal or whatever, that ultimately leads him to like find stuff in the end. So like it does have like a plot element too. It just feels like it's more prominent in the movie than it just being that.
Yeah, totally.
And the same with the owl lady, who we see kills the guy who writes the dog killer zines, as he was afraid she was going to do. And she comes to kill him and gets kind of scared off when he turns around. Yeah. And then she never shows back up to finish the job. So what do you guys make of that?
Well, so if it's real, then it could be, it reminds me kind of a lot of like Eyes Wide Shut a lot too. Like these secret organizations that are actually pulling the strings to everything, right? And like they control the people that control things, that like they control the people that we think are controlling things. You know what I mean? Yeah. The real people in charge. So like there is that section where the conspiracy theorist guy was talking about the owl imagery, like on the dollar bill, the owl imagery that we see throughout like a whole lot of things, like the Illuminati, right? It also ties in with that songwriter guy who talks about how he has written like everything famous, you know? I don't know.
Secret messages in them.
Yeah, secret messages in the songs. I don't know that with the owl lady and the songwriter person that they are actual literal people so much as they are representative of these secret societies that are pulling the strings. Like, there's no secret owl lady murdering someone, but there's all these rumors that like the Illuminati or whomever murder people all the time and organize it, right?
Yeah, anybody who gets close to uncovering them or gets too close to them.
Right. And the songwriter guy, you know, he plays like a million songs. He's like, you know, I wrote songs your grandparents danced to. I write the songs that kids today are dancing to. But in the middle of all that, he also has like Beethoven in there. So, and it also could be rumored that like, you know, Beethoven was part of the Illuminati. So like it could also be saying that there's not a literal person today doing it, but like these organizations have been pulling the strings for so long that they're not ever talked about, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just on that scene with the songwriter, I think that scene is worth the price of admission. I really, really like that scene where he finds Kurt Cobain's guitar and all the music's playing. I thought that was really well done. And it ends in such a violent way. I really like that scene.
Yeah, it was super cool. It was one of my favorites in the movie, and just super fascinating hearing him go through all those songs. It was just like really fun, like the wide range of songs that he went through.
Mm-hmm.
I do like that sort of thing that scene sets up, and this disappointment that comes in finding out the truth, which I think is one of the themes of the movie.
Yeah.
That the truth is disappointing. The answer is, oftentimes can make you feel worse than the ignorance.
Well, that, and also there's no romanticism in anything. Like all the art in the movies that he cherishes, these pop culture things that we all love and attach so much meaning to, our songs, our favorite movies, this romanticism of old Hollywood, whatever, it's all pointless, and it was all just to make some guy some money somewhere, The art that we all love, it doesn't have any value. And I mean, it does to us because we like it, but oftentimes the people creating it were just, they wanted a paycheck that day. So there's a certain amount of like cynical attitudes of like we assign so much obsession and meaning to these things when we shouldn't. We should be living our lives and focusing on what's really important, but we go down these, to use the expression again, rabbit holes where we get so caught up in all this stuff. What does it all mean? And really, it means at the end of the day, someone wanted to make some money.
Yeah. Actually, while watching this, I thought about Game of Thrones, because so many people have been like going down those rabbit holes for so long, and it may be, or even Lost, it may be that the ending or the conclusion isn't what you think it is, or what you've been obsessing over for the last 8 years or however long it's been on, for both. But I almost thought it was kind of calling out that type of culture, the research culture, pop culture digestion thing that we have like on Reddit now. And
I think it's deeper than that. I think because he's talking about even like, I'm the music you rebelled to when you were 15.
Oh, right.
So it's like even the idea, like every idea you've ever had about your individual personality and anything you like what defines you. This is the music I like. These are the movies I like. This is the whatever I like. Like everything you've done, the clothing you wear, the things you buy, the food you eat, all comes from like marketing. It's
curated for you. You think that you're an individual by these things, and these things define you, but they're put there. But
no, it's subliminal messages because, oh, look, this looks like a phallic object, or like that girl's mouth is parted in such a way, or
the hamburgers look like boobs.
Yeah, exactly. The golden arches look like boobs, or whatever. But basically it's saying that like, your favorite band that was so punk, that was ours too. We marketed rebellion. We marketed teenage. We marketed like anarchy. That's us. That's ours too.
Right.
So there's also a sense of that, I think, which is just like, the messages were never meant for you. It's meant for people who want to make money off you.
And as I said before, it's that there's a bit of like the answers aren't as satisfying. Like once you get to the truth, it's pretty disappointing. It brings you down. Yeah. I think there's also a bit of like the journey, the mystery is way more interesting than the answers or the results, which, that goes to what Chris was saying about like, I think how people are going to feel once Game of Thrones ends. If you look at other TV shows, how they end, any show that people were obsessed with and it ends is always contentious. Sopranos, Lost, I don't know, other shows, I guess. But
once you find out what the show that you were watching is actually about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think there's a bit of that going in, and that ties into what we were talking about earlier of like, why are people split on this film? Because I also think that what we find out in the end, like the answers that Andrew Garfield gets about where the girl went and what they were doing, are pretty unsatisfying. Like they're not that big of a deal. Like they're not the thing that you leave scratching your head about with the movie. You know what I mean? Like they're pretty uninteresting. And so I think the movie intentionally has this sort of explanation for it that is just like, oh, okay. Like that's it. All right.
Yeah.
And I think that's intentional to have it feel that way, but at the same time, you're going to make people feel that way.
Yeah. And there's this sense of like, because ultimately she goes down into like this bomb shelter because she's done with the world. Like this society that we've been talking about that curates everything for her and puts these ideas in for her. And that is something Andrew Garfield could never be. Like, his life is so wrapped up in putting meaning to all this stuff that, like, that is a decision that I think, like, ultimately, like, she is gone forever, and ultimately that doesn't matter, and that's kind of the point. But also, she is free and aware in a way that he is not.
Right.
So I just think that's kind of like an interesting parallel between the two of them, I guess.
Yeah. Even though they talk about how they have like unlimited TV down there.
That's true.
And they're just going to watch a bunch of TV and have a lot of sex.
That's true. Yeah. So maybe that's just nothing at all.
I mean, I think with the girlfriend, and I think the women in general in this, I think that that's more of a commentary on Hollywood and how Hollywood treats its women. Or Andrew Garfield kind of wanders through this movie and women are constantly there to have sex with him, or naked for him to observe. And I think that there's also something being said there. And ultimately the girlfriend goes down into this crypt with this man, like a old Egyptian pharaoh, right? The old Egyptian pharaohs used to be buried with their females, So it's almost, a lot of the women in this film are objects, and this is actually one of the things I kind of am a little bit leery, and maybe this is why A24 pushed it around. But I think this movie is commenting on objectifying women to a certain extent. However, I think that, like Fight Club started fight clubs, even though it's making fun of the people that would start a fight club, it's a farce but that inspired the true thing, right? And I think in a way some people could watch this movie and take away the wrong message, because I really think that it's commenting on the objectifying of women, and I'm curious to know what you guys think about that.
I think you're absolutely right, but I also think more than it's commenting on the objectification of women, I think it's commenting on the self-entitledness of a lot of like middle-class like white dudes who are just inherently kind of good-looking, like Andrew Garfield is, right? Like, he kind of just leers really creepily at women. Like, every time there's like a new woman in the frame, like, me as a viewer, I was thinking like, oh, he's kind of creeping on her, like, I'm kind of uncomfortable at him noticing her. Not that he ever does anything that creepy but like, he does. He stares at them. He is creepy about it. He's forward,
Right.
He doesn't seem to value them that much. And I think a lot of his obsession and what puts him on this journey is he was turned down by this girl. And usually it seems like through the rest of the movie, he doesn't have to work that hard for it. Right. So,
right.
She turned him down and kicked him out. And he was like, well, hang on. I want to have sex with that girl,
Yeah, why would she leave me? I own her.
Yeah, like, I'm not done with her yet.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the commentary for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. And a lot of the women end up being plot points and not having much else to do other than that. And he's doing that, I think, to make a point, So I'm with you on that, Chris. I think it's a very good reading of that aspect of the film.
Yeah, I found it very interesting, that part of it. But I also, I already said this, but like, it's kind of interesting. I'm afraid that people are going to take it the wrong way. Like we were talking about Extremely Evil and Vile, the Ted Bundy movie, and people misunderstanding that. Yeah, got that title. Yeah. And people misunderstanding that, and that's a much simpler movie to understand, I think, But anyways.
Right. Inevitably that will happen.
Yeah.
I think most people who would finish this movie are probably the kind who would think deep enough. You know what I mean?
Let's hope so. Yeah.
One thing we haven't talked about is just how funny the film is. Did you guys find it funny?
Mm-hmm.
Like, frequently?
Yeah. I don't remember laughing out loud. Well, that's not true. I think maybe a couple scenes, but...
Yeah. I like the whole, like, skunk thing and, like, the ridiculousness of the band, like the Jesus and the Brides of Dracula.
Yeah, it reminded me of that band Him.
Yeah, exactly. And like when he finally confronts that guy, and he's just kind of like a whiny little like skeezy guy about it, like when he's like got him in the bathroom.
Yeah, could have done without the poo in the toilet.
Yeah,
sure.
That was a really weird shot. I thought it was going to mean something, but it did not mean anything.
It was weird looking poo, right? Like,
Yeah.
It did make me think about it. Like, what does the poo mean? It was not normal.
Yeah.
What is Jesus eating?
Check your diet out, Jesus.
Yeah, it's one of those second and third viewing things we might put together. But yeah, I thought the skunk thing was really funny, and how that kind of kept, not to, like, the smell kept like dissipating throughout the movie, but like people still commented on it. Like, I think towards the end, someone's like, "Are you wearing like this perfume?" And he's like, "No."
Yeah.
But at first everyone's like, what does that smell?
Yeah. And that goes to his privilege too. So he smells like a skunk, and yet women are still throwing themselves at him, like he walks into parties in his pajamas, like fancy parties, and he just can go anywhere he wants, like in whatever he's wearing, like this is a really privileged guy. He may get kicked out of his apartment, but he's going to be fine wherever he lands, right?
He's not gonna. He doesn't even seem worried that he's getting kicked out of his apartment because he feels like he knows he's going to land on his feet. It's no big deal.
Yeah, like good-looking white guy in this world, essentially. I also found a lot of humor just in general out of the scenes with the homeless king, and it's kind of funny in the same way that the cowboy is in Mulholland Drive.
See, that's exactly what I was thinking of, though, and I kind of view that as a problem. I was like, when that happened, I was like, man, he is just shamelessly trying to be like Mulholland Drive. You know what I mean? It's kind of like there's when you read the Roger Ebert review of what the fuck is the name of that movie? The Girl Next Door with Alicia Cuthbert and Emile Hirsch,
Paul Dano,
yes, Paul Dano. Or in his review, he talks about how the movie tries so hard to remind you of risky business. Like, it's the movie that it wants so hard to be.
Right.
That's what this movie was reminding me of, and which is not a bad thing. It's good to try to emulate David Lynch. That's a good thing to do, right? That's if everyone steals, steal from the best. That said, tonally, I couldn't help but be conscious of the fact that I was like, okay, he's really wanting to emulate David Lynch here with like this weird character.
I think it shifts around enough for it to not feel just like completely that way, because he's also pretty shamelessly doing the Vertigo scene where Jimmy Stewart is stalking Kim Novak.
Yeah.
And he's driving in the car. Like, it's cut the same way where it fades between shots of like the point of view looking out of the car following, and then that exact same shot of him that they use of Jimmy Stewart in Vertigo. It's like,
and that's certainly where the Bernard Herrmann score is most prominent.
Did you notice that whenever he goes to the park and that they're, I think one of the graves that they're hanging out with is next to Alfred Hitchcock's grave?
Right, yeah. It's when there's that movie screening and he sees like the girls and they walk away and they get into the limo with the weird pirate guy. Like when they're standing on or leaning against a grave tombstone, and when they move away, I believe it's Hitchcock.
Oh.
I mean, I guess that's obviously not subtle, and it's not super cool either, but it's like whatever.
Well, it just goes with the theme of constant nostalgia and pop culture being on everyone's minds. Like, everyone has this romanticism of old Hollywood in this movie. Like, even the movie itself kind of is filmed a lot like an old Hollywood drama with like the noir elements. So
and all the posters in everybody's apartments are old Hollywood films.
Exactly. It's like a 90s movie, like a 90s indie movie where like everyone has like a weird obsession with like film knowledge, But I think that's part of the point, which is that like we're all obsessed over this stuff. And maybe I think that's partly why this movie is so controversial, is because it's like, hey, the thing that you're watching now is part of a waste of time, kind of. Like, It's not necessarily fun to watch art like that. Isn't there like another movie that we watched recently that kind of had like a similar message? Like
was it the Jake Gyllenhaal art horror movie? I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah, maybe.
Saved my life.
No, maybe that's when we talked about it initially. But
Velvet
I feel
Buzzsaw.
Like there's some Velvet Buzzsaw. There's some movie though that I think someone watched recently where like part of the commentary the movie itself is making is that like movies are it's Vice.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Vice. A lot of people I think railed against that movie because part of what that movie was saying, which is just like, hey, while you were watching Survivor, this person was like ruining the country, or like while you were doing this, Dick Cheney was doing this. Like, a lot of the movie says that kind of thing, right? And I feel like this movie has like a similar message, which is like, hey, while you're, circle jerking to old nostalgia stuff you like, really that doesn't have any meaning.
And one of the old Hollywood things I just want to point out while we're still close to like talking about the old movie posters, I believe when he's hanging out with the girl the first night in the apartment, they're watching How to Marry a Millionaire. Mm-hmm. And that's also the poster on the wall, which I think it's like really hitting you over the head at that point. But I think in the end, that movie is about three women trying to find millionaires to marry. And in the end, it's like it's three women going into a bunker with a millionaire. I think that's kind of just a little fun.
She learned from that
early
movie.
on in the film. Yeah.
She learned from all that art that we're talking about, like she shaped her life around it and her ideas around it of what a successful life should be,
Yeah.
What'd you guys think of the squirrel that fell from the tree and was like dying in front of him?
Shocking a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it kind of falls in with the dog thing because he kind of just looks at it and then moves on with his life. Right? It's one of those things that doesn't seem to affect him if it's not a girl.
Or a girl or one of his conspiracy theories that he's obsessed with.
Right.
Because that's like his vice, right? Like is like obsessing over things like that.
Totally. And I think this movie is for like people who also like to obsess over conspiracies and enjoy the mystery, but maybe those are some of the people that aren't satisfied by the end result of like where this film ends up. Like I'm looking at one of like the related reviews on IMDb and it says like this film goes nowhere fast, essentially, is like the headline. Or like nor film goes nowhere fast and slow. Or it goes nowhere slowly is what it says. And
it goes nowhere fast, slowly.
Yeah.
That's what it should have been.
Sure. But the part of me that enjoyed Lost and enjoys these films that just keep asking questions and questions and build and build and build, I really just found like the whole ride super fun. It's super fun to follow along with regardless of how it ended up. It's like, well, the ride was so fun.
I get that. Chris, was it worth it?
Yeah, I really like this film.
Did you like it more than you thought you would based on all the shuffling around it was getting?
Yeah. I mean,
I know I did.
To be honest, yeah, absolutely. So did I. So when it came time, Under the Silver Lake, it came out like 2 weeks ago or so. We had to do in-games, and then, or not in-games, Adventures in-game. And I was like, I wanted to do Under the Silver Lake, but I was super worried about it. Like we were just going to come on and bash it. But yeah, I mean, and that's kind of what, I know it's not going to make a ton of money, but that's what's so confusing to me about A24 just kind of shuffling it around like it did. Yeah, it's definitely worth it. It's this little bizarre nugget full of enjoyment.
Yeah, and it's awesome that you brought up Southland Tales, Mike, because I feel about this film a similar way that I felt about Southland Tales the first time I watched that, which, if you haven't seen Southland Tales, it's Richard Kelly. It's his follow-up to Donnie Darko. It's this like bizarre, like sort of post-apocalyptic sort of LA movie as well.
Yeah, starring The Rock and Sarah Michelle Gellar and Justin Timberlake and
Mandy Moore,
John Lovitz.
Yeah, it's a really bizarre movie, and it leaves you scratching your head. And I don't know if it's that I end up liking that movie so much despite all of its flaws. I feel like this movie could fall in that same thing where it's just such a ambitious, fun ride that like I end up loving it, even though I'm sure it has its flaws. I'm sure there's perfectly valid reasons to dislike it, much like there is Southland Tales. Like Southland Tales is a film I love, but I know there's so many issues with it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, if this movie had been Southland Tales, it would have not been worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, Southland Tales, and it could have very well ended up that way. Because I think Southland Tales is a movie that the sum of it isn't greater than its parts, or I don't know what I'm trying to say there, like what the saying is, but it doesn't add up to being a great movie. There might be some good sequences in it, whereas I think, and I'm not quite sure yet, but I think that Under the Silver Lake adds up to a great movie.
I think it's a better film objectively than Southland Tales. I'm with you.
Yeah.
All right. Does anybody got anything else?
I don't.
No, I'm good. I'm glad we watched this one. I'm glad we got to see it and talk about it.
Thank you for going on about it so much, Chris, and ensuring that we watch it, because I'm super glad we did.
Yeah. We asked for some questions on Twitter for this. We didn't really get that many questions, but we did get a lot of people just commenting on it and saying that they enjoyed it. So I do think that it does have the benefit of like only the people who want to watch this movie are going to be ordering it on VOD. Whereas like in theaters, they won't have a whole bunch of people who like paid for something just to go see a movie in theaters and then end up being disappointed by it. So I think the its status amongst people who know what it is, I think it will be well received like on the home video market. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm waiting around for that article in 5 years about why Under the Silver Lake was so misunderstood.
I feel like we don't need that article because it's an unruly long movie. We kind of just dissected why it's not going to be enjoyable for most people.
We'll see. I mean, 2001 was notoriously kind of misunderstood.
That's true.
And now look at it.
That's true. But there's also...
I don't think this is that. But,
yeah.
You know.
But I don't think any movie in the world could have the same impact 2001 had again.
No, I don't think so. You're right. Oh, what do you guys think the parrot said?
I don't even remember now.
Yeah, I don't think it ever made sense what it was, because it was never supposed to be clear what the parrot was saying.
Yeah.
Because Andrew Garfield never understood what it said. So I don't think we were supposed to understand either.
Just trying to find meaning.
Yeah, it's one of those like the last scenes of the movie with him where he's with like the older topless lady across the way, and she's like, "Oh, I used to try to figure it out, but I just gave up and just let him go."
Yeah.
It's that theme.
What an annoying neighbor, right?
Being topless and having a bird that just talks all the time.
Yeah.
The bird thing sounds more annoying. The bird part of that.
I have no issues with people running on topless. Let people live the way they want to live, and that wouldn't annoy me.
Yeah, unless I don't want to see them topless, in which case it would probably annoy me quite a bit.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that does it for this episode, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for listening. And then, of course, as always, thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for doing our intro and outro music. You can hear more of his music at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
All right, stay tuned to this podcast channel. Our next episode will be over Detective Pikachu. And then also, don't forget about our new Casually Criterion episode over Stalker, coming out soon.
Yeah. Send us your questions to answer on those two films or your thoughts to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at casualcinecast or our email casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. It really means a lot to us, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
See ya.